So, Jeff, you have to introduce yourself.
Okay.
Your name, your full name, and your title. Your signature. What I mean.
Okay.
You like it.
All right. I'm Jeff. Okay. I'm Jeff Santos. I'm the director for Virginia Paranormal Investigations.
So, Jeff, tell me about your how did you get involved into research about UFOs? What made you interested in?
Well, the paranormal in general is something I've always been interested in. My dad got me interested in it at a young age. UFOs, ghosts, cryptozoological creatures, everything paranormal pretty much. So as I got older and was able to drive, got my first car, the first thing I would do is go out to local urban legends and explore them, see if there's any truth behind them. And years later, in 2008, I joined the military, the Air Force, and I met a guy named Scott. And he was with the paranormal team in Whiteman, Missouri, and they used to go out and debunk a lot of stuff and look into urban legends and ghost reportings and such. And we found that we both shared a very strong interest in the paranormal. So we ended up starting the team. We started out small, just investigating claims that we could find through research, through what people had claimed they'd seen, be it spiritual, be it UFOs, be it strange creatures. And we would go out and try to investigate these, take pictures, take video, and get some evidence. And we built up, and we got to the point where we were getting people to come to us to take cases. A lot of the stuff we would apply to the cases would be stuff that we've learned in law enforcement. I've been in, when I was in the military, I worked in law enforcement, and then 2 more years of law enforcement after the military. So a total of about 8 years of law enforcement. So we took a lot of those investigative techniques and we apply them to our investigations, as well as science, and we just built the team up from there.
So, what about the UFOs? When did you first met them?
I would have to say the first investigation I did into a UFO was in 2009, and this was one that was seen over Dover. There was a certain area of Dover, Delaware, and there is an Air Force base nearby, of course, got to keep that in mind, but there have been several sightings of UFOs. People describe a triangular shaped object in the sky that was illuminated, fully illuminated, and the reports went back as far as 1906, I believe. So we set out down there, and when you're investigating something where people see strange lights in the sky, it's kind of hit or miss. It's not something that has a pattern necessarily that's going to be there every night. So it's one of those things where you could go out and see nothing, or you could get there on the lucky night where it's going to come back, or where there's going to be some kind of activity and see something. Unfortunately, when we went out there that night, we didn't see anything, but it was still interesting that there was such claims. Well, years later, probably about 9 years later or so, we were driving up to Delaware through Dover, and Linda was with me. Linda is also my partner with Virginia Paranormal Investigations. And we're in the car driving up Route 13 right near Dover there, and both of us, we see this light come out of the sky. It shoots down, and then it stops and shoots off at a strange angle that you wouldn't typically see any kind of shooting. Of course, it wouldn't be a shooting star, any kind of man-made aircraft that could go that fast, be that bright. So, of course, we ended up seeing it after all those years, right there where we first investigated the claims of there being UFO sightings.
What about the experience that you were sharing with me when you were in the Air Force? So you were flying and you saw?
I wasn't. No, when I was in the Air Force, I was in security forces, and we did law enforcement, base security, and we would do outside the wire missions in Iraq when we were deployed. So we were over there in Iraq, and we were way out in the middle of the desert, in the country per se, where there was no other houses around, no other light pollution or anything else. So we stopped, and we would drive all night doing these patrols. So we would stop in secure areas, and we'd get out and just stretch our legs, take a break. So there's 13 of us on this squad, and we look up and we see this strange red light that's surrounded by 3 white lights, and it's sitting there, just sitting in the sky, and we're trying to figure out what this could possibly be. We have a device that was called a Blue Force Tracker that would show us all the aircraft that was in the area and such. Nothing was coming up on there. So all of a sudden it starts going up higher and higher to where it appeared to be the same size of a star, and just shot off across the sky and disappeared. couldn't get over it. Everyone saw it. Our squad leader, I mean, we had multiple years of experience here. The squad leader, he had been in the Air Force about 18 years. He had never seen anything like it. He called it into the desk. They had no idea what it was. So it was very interesting that, like I said, we all saw this, so many witnesses, so many years of experience, and no one could say what it was.
So you did report to the headquarters about the case, but they have no clue.
They had no idea.
And where was that?
This was in Iraq.
Yeah, where like?
Near the town of Safwan.
Safwan. And having this, I don't know how to say, having this opportunity to see all these objects, UFOs. You are now a researcher, so what kind of difficulties you see now in terms of investigating the UFOs?
Well, there's certain ways we approach it. A lot of the things we get, a lot of the calls we get are just reports. And there's not a whole lot we can do with, say, the person that saw a light in the sky and they want to report it. For example, a gentleman called, and right here in Virginia, just down the road near Gloucester, he described seeing this football-shaped illuminated object in the sky. So there's really nothing we can do at that point except for go out there, frequent the area where he saw it, get the exact location that he saw it, and go out there and see if there's anything reoccurring. A lot of times it's been reported that extraterrestrials will return to a site more than once. So if we get a sighting, we want to go out to that area as many times as we can to see if it comes back. A lot of times it's just a one-time thing. We'll go out there and we won't see anything. There's been cases where people have described these strange lights. There was one gentleman who was on a back mountain road, and he had called up and he said, I was driving with my friend, and he described it. He said, I don't want to be too cliche, but it was almost like a Star Wars laser. He saw this light come at him down the road through the windshield between him and his passenger and out the back window. This long, long light, and he had no idea what it was. And my theory was perhaps you were being scanned. We don't know what kind of technology they have. A lot of things that we can't explain is beyond our imagination even. Perhaps this was some kind of a device that they were nearby and they were using it to scan him and his friend or the vehicle to see what it was, to collect data for whatever reason for their research purposes. But there are also the cases where there's the reoccurring lights, where there was people out in Louisa County, and they would call us up and they would say that there's the same light that would appear in the same place every night. The first thing we want to ask is, does it move? Because a lot of times people will mistake a planet or just a very bright star for a UFO. So they claimed it was moving. They did see it moving. They'd see it move back and forth. They'd see it hover up and down. So we asked them, how often does it occur? Well, these ladies, they said it would happen every other night. Every other night this would be out there like clockwork. So what we do is we want to make sure we approach every case and we want to rule out any rational explanation first. So we want to look at this place on a map. We want to see if there's any structures in the area, any kind of airports in the area, anything that could possibly explain these sightings that they're seeing. Then we want to take a star map and we want to see what is the planetary alignment, what stars are in the area, what planets are possibly visible that night, and is this in the same direction as any of those planets or any of those things that could be significantly visible during this time of the year. So after we rule out that, we go out there and we set up for observation. And when we went out there to these people, they showed us some interesting video. They had some video of these lights in the sky that were almost separate. They almost looked like they were separate, like three lights together, like close together. And it wasn't anything like I'd seen before. It wasn't anything that could be described as anything natural that I know of or that our research could turn up that could possibly look like that. Unfortunately, when we were there, it didn't come back. I don't know if certain things know when there's an observation crew there or a research crew and they want to stay clear of it. For some reason, we don't know how much they're listening to us, how much they hear. Also, it could have just been, like I said, they could have been done. The ladies hadn't seen the light since then, since that night that we're out there set up. So it was interesting.
Any kind of other videos you have?
Let me think. Nothing with anything significance. Like I said, mostly it's reports. Now, there was one gentleman who contacted us from New York, and he had this great story, but he wouldn't let us record it. He was afraid that the government would get onto him and come and take him away. But he had one of the best ones I've heard, the best reports I've heard, where he was constantly seeing these lights outside of his window. And when he was sleeping at night, these beams of light, several beams of light, would come in through all his windows, and it was almost like he couldn't move while these beams were on him. So he'd be frozen in his bed until the beams left. Now, one night he awoke to these beams of light, and after they disappeared, he went running outside, and he claimed he saw a craft sitting outside an actual flying saucer landed outside in his yard. He said that he was abducted at a young age, and that these aliens would come back frequently and abduct him over and over and over again. Now, one thing we consider is there's a lot of people out there who have a very vivid imagination, of course, but then I'm willing to believe the possibility of anything. So when it comes to UFOs, if I found hard evidence, if an alien landed in front of me and stepped out of the ship, I wouldn't be surprised. I believe that's definitely possible. However, if there was some other evidence that came up that said there's no such thing as life on other planets, I'd be open to that possibility as well. Now, there is something interesting about cases, and to talk about, like I said, we investigate a variety of paranormal claims. Whatever people can explain, we go and check it out. So whatever's paranormal, we go and check it out, whatever people can explain. Most of the times our calls are for ghosts, but there is one thing that a lot of people don't consider. I think there's a lot more extraterrestrial encounters than people really know. And I think a lot of the times when people report their house being haunted, it's not actually a ghost that's haunting it. They're getting visitors from extraterrestrials. Now, there's an entity called a shadow figure. And a lot of times, there's a lot of different theories as to what shadow figures are. Some people think they're parasites from another dimension. Some people think that they are demonic. Some people think that they're residual hauntings or intelligent hauntings of people who have passed. But another theory is that they're actually extraterrestrials. Now, there have been some cases where we went to where people thought, hey, I have all these ghosts in my house. I'm seeing these dark shadows moving around. Well, after we looked into it a little bit, there were no other characteristics of there being a haunting, no history of any deaths there or any battles that took place there, nothing that these people have done that has drawn anything to their house, no prior experiences with anything paranormal. And the figures that they were seeing, there was one particular place that comes to mind right there in Norfolk, Virginia, not too far from here, and the woman was seeing these shadows all over her house. They'd move about, and they wouldn't be regular shadow figures, like they'd be tall and long, like these kind of misformed shadows that she would see moving about her house. She'd see things outside of her window, like silhouettes outside of her window looking in. And the more we talked about this, we started thinking this is a good possibility that she's actually getting a visit from extraterrestrials. Because if you think about it, when they move about, I'm sure they have the technology. We've heard several times where they can cloak their ships. Perhaps there's a possibility that they can cloak themselves and appear as shadows to move about people's houses. Once again, for what reason, we don't know, but possibly to gather research, to gather answers to their questions about us, about where we live, about what we do, about our daily lives, our routines, and just people in general. So a lot of times I believe that these shadow figures are actually entities. Now, we did what's called a spirit box session, and the interesting thing about this is this works on radio waves. So the theory is that spirits can communicate through these radio waves, but also you think about what else can communicate through radio waves. Of course, extraterrestrials, aliens would have the ability to communicate through these radio waves. So we'll ask questions, try to get responses, and some of the responses we were getting were little people up on the roof, out in the yard, fire in the sky, different things that made us believe that this could definitely be something of an extraterrestrial nature. So a lot of times when the houses, people think they're haunted, maybe they're not. Maybe they're not haunted by ghosts.
Yeah, again, the difficulty, I think, is in gathering this kind of data. So where do you go to look up for the data? I mean, I was sending you the CIA reports about,
right.
I think it's like, it's worth believing or not?
I think it's worth believing. Now, I think with the CIA reports, I think they tried to leave it open to say, believe it or not, but we don't really believe. They leave it as open-ended, kind of, that they didn't thoroughly investigate it to say it is paranormal, to say that it is a UFO, because I don't think they would ever come out and say, this is a UFO, we have evidence of people from another planet, because there'd probably be chaos. And I think a lot of the claims that they get, the ones that they can debunk, the ones that they can say this was, has a rational explanation, they'll release that, they'll put that out there, so that the other ones that are talking about, where a pilot will see a flying saucer. There was one where a pilot, he described seeing this flying saucer, described how long it was, everything else. He flew up alongside of it. And these pilots, they have 20/20 vision. They have a very rational mind. They're higher ranking military, people. So, but they leave these other reports in there so that people kind of think, well, he must have been mistaking it, because if they come forward and say that this is an extraterrestrial, then there'll be chaos. Now, I also think there's different, just like in a rank in the military, where the lowest rank is on a need-to-know basis. You don't have more information than you need. I think the government is structured in the same way, where it's not like the government as a whole is keeping secrets by any means, but I think that the government is different ranks per se. So the higher levels, they have more information than the people that are in the lower offices. They don't need to know certain information, so they don't have access to that information. They're not necessarily lying. They're not necessarily saying, well, there's no evidence of UFOs or extraterrestrials. To them, there's not, because they haven't been given that evidence because they're not on a need-to-know basis. But these claims, there was Project Blue Book that was opened back in the 50s. Okay, Project Blue Book was another project that the military started, and they would gather reports from pilots, from military officials, from everyone else that would talk about seeing flying saucers. Some of them were small reports that could have been something else. Others were definite pilots that, like I said, had seen UFOs and they couldn't describe what it was. Now these guys, they're pilots, they know what's up there. They know what other aircrafts look like, they know what something of this earth looks like, and for some of the things they described, there's just no explanation for it. So I think if you look into this project, into Project Blue Book, into the CIA records, you will see a lot of files in there that they kind of left open because they didn't have an answer for them. And that's something right there. If you don't have an answer for it, it could very well be that it is something of an extraterrestrial nature, but you just don't want to say that that's what it is.
But in these CIA reports, have you come across some interesting cases, like very interesting cases? Or
I have come across, there were some interesting ones as we looked at the CIA reports. There, like I said, there was the one with the pilot, and they actually drew this flying, it was a flying saucer, they actually drew it out, how long it was. He had a very good description of this, but it was one of those cases that, like I said, that they left open, that they said they weren't able to establish a definite answer on. Now, what else was there? What was I thinking about? What was the one that we looked at? Do you remember?
There was the one over the lines. It was the lights dancing around in the sky, and then there was multiple varies, like lights in the sky, kind of vague reports as well.
Right. Yeah, there were a lot of vague reports, and like I said, those are the ones that I think they kind of put out. They kind of put an explanation on. They kind of say that, these lights can be various things. I saw some of NASA's reports where when they were out on the lunar missions, they'd see all these lights around in the sky, and they were actually ice particles, because the water, when it gets released up there in space, it immediately turns to ice and it floats around. But one thing they were pointing out as they looked at some of the videos is that some of these ice particles, they should all be flying away, all be flying in the same direction, but they'd change direction, and some of them would fly back, and they'd fly in a zigzag pattern and such. And they said, well, ice, they had some scientists on there that said ice wouldn't fly like that. If ice was coming off the ship or anything else, it would keep flying in the same direction, which was weird. So, but they try to explain away a lot of the things that they see, I think. A lot of the evidence that's presented.
But maybe there are like some territories in the United States or all over the world where these cases happen most frequently or less frequently? Do you have that kind of information?
Yes, yes. Now, of course, out west, out in Nevada, there's a lot of reports. That's where they say Area 51 is where they do. They have. I believe they released some records that they have been actually doing research on UFOs. Now, keep in mind when they say UFOs, they don't necessarily mean extraterrestrials. They just mean objects that are flying that they can't say what they are. Could they be from another government, another country? Could they be something that people have seen that would, they would think it's a UFO, but it's really something that the military is experiencing with and such. Now, there was an interesting experience that I had out that way. We were doing some training out there in Nevada, actually, and we were doing night firing, where you shoot the M4s looking through night vision goggles, and the range is just out over the desert. There's some mountains in the background, and there was 100 of us there, probably a little over 100, all filling up the range, and it was complete blackout. So the only thing you could see through is the night vision goggles. Now, there were a couple guys that I was with, and I the whole time I was out there, I was talking about, this isn't too far from Area 51, we're probably going to see some UFOs, and they were like, you're nuts, that stuff doesn't exist. So we're out there doing this night firing, and then out of the darkness from you could see the silhouette of the hills in the background, like the little mountains, and this rotating light came shooting out like this, and then just disappeared. It was gone. And it was just all these several white lights just rotating, and it was gone, and everyone gasped. Like, you could just hear the silence fell over everybody. Everyone stopped shooting their guns, and there was just silence for a while. And then, people had their cell phones out trying to record it and stuff. And the guy came up to me after that. He's like, I thought you were crazy, but he's like, after seeing that, I'm a believer now. I believe that this stuff's out there. So that is an area where there's frequent sightings, of course, out there of Area 51. But if you go on any of the websites where they document some of the sightings, MUFON especially, there are several sightings in every area. Like, they document everything, and it's not, like I said, it's not just necessarily of an alien nature. It's just strange things that people see in the sky that they can't explain, and they record every single sighting. So even in Virginia alone, there's several. I was talking to a guy. We got a call from a guy in Williamsburg, Virginia, and this guy was in the Army, and his buddy was in the Navy. But he worked on, had something to do with working on the planes in the Navy, and he knew a lot about flying objects, just all around, all the planes, everything else. And they were having a barbecue with them and several of their neighbors. He said there was about 10 people there. And it was towards the evening time. It wasn't dark out yet, but they're sitting there having a barbecue, and he said he noticed this plane. They saw a plane flying. They could see it clearly. And then all of a sudden, this triangular-shaped object, he said he could see the sun just sparkling off it, like shining off it. It came up, flying faster than the plane, and passed the plane, and then shot off into the sky. And this is another one where there's a sighting, where you can go back there, you can observe to see if it happens again, but it could just be a one-time passing thing. Now, we do have methods, of course, for investigating cases where there has been something that has actually landed or where they have actually seen beings. And what we like to do for that is, of course, we got to stay safe. So we like to, keep rubber gloves on hand for such like that in case we find any evidence. Any evidence we find, we want to gather. Now, it hasn't come to the point where we found this kind of hard evidence yet. But if you can look for anything from, broken tree branches to burnt pieces of grass. If you see a path that's through the weeds where the weeds are broken and such, gather that sample, we'll put it in a plastic bag, and we'll see if we can get somebody to do a little bit of research on it and see if they find any kind of weird matter on it. Now, when we do that, of course, when we gather this evidence, it's important to make sure that no one else tampers with the evidence. So we always have 2 people with it, and we'll keep 2 people with it until it's in a bag, till it's sealed, and someone initials that seal on the bag. And then we'll keep a record of who it gets passed to from person to person, so we know everyone that touched this bag with the evidence in it. Now, what we'll do also is when we're looking for this, we'll start at the center, and we'll search outward and kind of in a spiral. So what we'll do is we'll start, say, this person had seen something in their backyard. So we'll start there, and we'll walk out in little circles, farther and farther and farther till we get out. We'd like to go, depending on the size of their property, of course, we're limited by that, but we'd like to go out about 500 meters just to look for any traces of anything strange that's still left behind from any kind of landing or any kind of beings that they've seen walking around in their backyard.
Yeah, and Jeff, could you please explain the way you do it? Like, I mean, what kind of equipment do you have? What kind of equipment do you utilize when you are when you investigating? Because and also cover please the question if these objects are physical or non-physical. I mean.
Okay. Absolutely. Now, do you want me to hold the equipment as I talk about it, or?
Let's talk. I mean, through. Let's start with the physical or non-physical objects of these UFOs.
Okay.
What kind of like metal? Maybe there's a copper. Maybe just a rock. What they are made of? Like these sources.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as far as the UFOs, there's several different theories. Some people believe that these aliens are actually interdimensional beings. Let me start that over again. So as far as UFOs, there's several different theories. Some people actually believe that these are interdimensional beings which can travel in and out between dimensions, and they're not per se from another planet, but from a parallel universe. Now, as we go into that theory, it gets a little farther and farther out there, but of course I'm open to the possibility of it. There's also the more accepted belief, I believe, that these are beings from another planet. Some people even have the theory that they are from the moon. It's interesting that we haven't been to the moon since the 70s. We stopped going there. Mm-hmm. You would think with the way technology has progressed, I mean, you look at back in the 70s, we were listening to records, and now we're listening to MP3s. You can't even hold the song or the album. Mm-hmm. It's all digital. So that being said, I guess it's a little beyond me how in the 70s, even in the 60s, we went to the moon. By now, I would think that we'd have people living up there, but they just stopped. They just dropped it. And to me, it almost seems like they went up there and they found something or someone that said, hey, this is ours, don't come back. I find that interesting. But as far as what the UFOs or the flying saucers are made of, depending on which term you're using and what you're seeing, there was a report of a gentleman who was on the crew that went to recover the crash back in the 40s in Roswell, New Mexico. That's the most famous one. And they had his children on, I believe this interview was probably back in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s. They had his children on and everything. And they remember him. He got this strange piece of metal that he couldn't explain from the crash site, and he took it back to show his family because he couldn't believe it. Like, they were transporting this up to a different Air Force base, I believe in Ohio maybe, and he stopped along the way, and he said, look at this, I've never seen anything like it. And it was a metal that was so light, it could bend every which way, but at the same time, it was pretty much indestructible. And that's the theory as to what these alien ships are made of. I guess it kind of based off of that. But there's several different theories, and like I said, it's one of those things that no one really knows for sure until we actually get our hands on one. Now, are there UFOs here that a facility has and they're not releasing the information? I don't know. I'm sure, if they do, they know what it's made out of. But as far as the common person, we've never had that released to us. So that's what we're out there to try to find out. We want to get that evidence. We want to try to find out what these are made of. There's been some claims that perhaps they are actually propelled by almost nuclear bombs. Something that with the force of a nuclear bomb that propels some of these flying saucers from some of the different things they've picked up on satellites and on telescopes and such from some local observatories and such. They've actually come up with that theory as well. I don't know, that's a little beyond me, the mechanics of it, but we're definitely out there to see if we can find evidence that these do exist, they are from another planet, and what kind of beings that they're actually piloted by.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing we do when we get to any case involving a UFO is we take the UFO field investigation report, and this has a couple different blocks on it that we fill out. Some of the key things we want to get is the number of witnesses. Any witnesses that we have found that have seen the same thing that the person that contacted us is describing. We've marked if we've taken statements from those witnesses. They're done on a separate form. We mark if there's any evidence collected. We go ahead and we talk about the date and time that we're contacted, and then we go into the weather. What was the weather at the time of report? What's the current weather? What are the significant structures in the areas I talked about before? History of sightings. What are the astronomical events that might have been present that night? And what is the investigator's senses? The investigator's senses is a big thing. What do you see, hear, feel? What do you smell? And when you're talking to the person also, what kind of vibe do you get from that person? A lot of times when there's a UFO involved, when it's extraterrestrial, the person can experience time lapses. They can be a little delirious. So it may sound to a regular person like they are coming up with a story, but they really may still be in some kind of a shock from what they've experienced.
Okay.
So we want to keep track of all that, and we put that in our narrative, of course. Now, a lot of the equipment that we use, a lot of the same equipment that we use for a ghost investigation, of course. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, this is an electromagnetic radiation detector, and it's a lot like an EMF detector that we would use in ghost hunting. That's left from the electromagnetic field. So if there is any residue behind where something landed or where something was wandering around in the yard, perhaps it would let us know on this. So we take the readings, we take a baseline reading when we get there to see what has changed and to see if there's anything that's worth noting on it. So this is just a regular digital voice recorder. We'll take it into the Audacity program on the computer, and we'll go ahead and we'll analyze the sound from the course of the investigation to see if there's any strange sounds that we can't explain. We'll also what the foot candles are, what the lumens are in the room. And you can set this, if you push this button here, it will record the max foot candles that it's reached. So it'll record the max light. And what it is it's tripod mountable. So we'll mount this on a tripod, and we can set this out. Let's say, for instance, there's a person who has some bright lights appearing in their yard or on their property every night. So we can set this out here, we can push the max button, and we'll see what the baseline light is, and then we frequently check it back, especially if they're lights. Those two, it's fluctuating a little bit. 1 or 2 points of fluctuation. There's a flash of light. So if I bring it out into the open light, and But another key word there is radio waves. What else can communicate through radio waves? We believe that aliens, of course, would be able to. It could go forward or backward. You can adjust how fast it sweeps through the channels. This is just FM and AM signals. And like I said, you can adjust the sweep rate, but it will keep going through the channels. So if I slow it down, you know, it can go really fast or it can go really waves. Now this is blacker than black. So if you have a shadow moving in a dark room, this will pick it up. And what it will do is on the other side there's a very bright LED light that will light up. So we'll put this in a dark room where there's a camera, and this will be in front of the camera so that if a shadow entity passes in front of this, this light will go on and let us know at the base station where we're monitoring it that there's some movement in that room that shouldn't be there. So we'll be able to go back, analyze that footage, and also respond to that room or that part of the house to see if there's anything there.
Cool. Can we turn it on?
Yes.
What? Oh, I mean, if it's not very difficult, let's do that. Not maybe outdoors, outside.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You want me to?
Yeah, well, let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty bright LED light on there, but so it'll just go like this here.
So it's a custom thing, right?
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. So when it's tripped, if this battery works, maybe it doesn't.
Uh-huh.
I think so.
We
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
So when it's
Okay.
when it's tripped, that LED light will come on the front there, and then whenever anything moves in front of it, I think that battery's about dead.
Yeah, probably.
Interesting.
I got another one though. Might work.
Yes, you got so many tools. It's cool.
Yeah, we keep extra batteries with us and everything else.
I mean, like all these boxes with
Yeah, so there it is.
In the back in the box.
Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Yeah, because this isn't picking up anything. My best. Just kind of lay down.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Ready. Okay. Yeah, let's put one more.
Let's see what else would be good. Okay. Let me know when.
I'm good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think.
There's one sitting back there, one of those old bombed out tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Just sitting there all out. Some of the desert out there looks just like a vehicle scrapyard or something.
Yeah, yeah.
like that.
I think, but it's an old one. I think it's
Mhm.
Russian Soviet tank, or it's American.
I don't know.
I think it's Russian. It's an T-95, I guess.
Is it?
I think,
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about them, but yeah, it was just sitting out there.
but in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't know. Probably they bought the same vehicles. I mean, because they buy and sell.
Right, that's true. That's
Tanks
true.
all over the world. Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should go back to the.
Yeah. I can do that
other
too.
stuff.
Let me just change the angle. And you can like how do you call it? Just lift it a little
Tilt
bit
it?
towards
Yeah.
me. Yeah, this way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's try.
The constellation map at all. You know, we can aim this at it and see if we can get a better look at it, so we can identify anything. But it hasn't actually, you know, come into play yet, where we've actually seen anything strange on it that we couldn't explain. Okay, so now we go out into the night to search for unidentified flying objects or anything else strange that may be out there. And we're going to set up our telescope and spend countless hours just observing the skies, seeing what we can detect.
So when does your preparation for the research start?
The preparation for the research, it actually starts as soon as we get the report. Immediately we're looking into the area, we're looking into the surroundings, we're looking at anything that could play a factor in what these people are seeing. As I mentioned, structures nearby airports. We're also trying to trace back to when they first saw the object to see what was going on in the sky at that time. Were there any kind of events, any kind of certain star alignments or certain constellations or planets that might have been visible that might have thrown these people off and made them think they were seeing something that wasn't really paranormal by any means.
Okay. So when you start the preparation, like you arrive at the spot and what you do?
Yes, when we arrive at the spot, first thing we do is we observe the area, we take our baseline readings, we see if there's anything unusual that our meters are detecting, and we question the witnesses. We want to get to the witnesses as soon as we can while the incident is still fresh in their mind. We want to get every single detail we can from them, right down to how they were feeling. What
Take like a couple of hours, 3 hours, 2 hours?
It really depends on the nature of the investigation. Now, if it is a large piece of land and they have had activity all over the land, or they just saw strange lights out their window and they're not sure where on the land it was, we're going to search that whole land. Like I said, at least we want to do a 500-meter radius, starting in the center and slowly circling our way out until we've reached that 500-meter limit if we can. It could take a long time. If it's a case where they're seeing lights or strange things in the sky that come back frequently, we might spend the whole night out there observing to see if it comes back.
All right, Scott, so what are we looking at here?
Okay, so if you can see this little dot right there, that's a footage of kind of a zoomed out picture there. And then as it gets closer, wow, you can see a sort of an inner orb inside of it.
That's interesting.
That is very interesting.
And that's when it's still fairly light out, too.
Yeah, sunlight's still out. And I don't see any like figures inside of it other than just a circle from that one.
That's very bright.
That's a
But I
bright
have a
one.
question.
It is. Very
I have
When
an
I
old
zoomed in,
digital
you can see
camera.
how
I was
bright that
taking
is.
pictures,
Right.
Yeah.
and they all came out the
And
same.
when I zoom back
weird.
out, it's
Yes,
still
because this is bugging me to
quite
death.
bright.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very noticeable in the sky.
And it's not in a place.
So what are we looking at here, Linda?
So you can see this little bit of light that's floating around here, and her breath that comes through every so often because it was quite cold out that night. And of course, the movement of it is caused by her hand moving as opposed to the object itself moving. But you can see that it becomes this really bright pinpoint of light at some points, and then at other points it kind of, see, there we go, it's more of a pinpoint of light, and then it kind of, you know, morphs back into this little bit of a, almost like an orb.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And this.
See on this picture, they captured the probably a movement
What is that?
because the light is streaking.
Yeah.
Did you?
Like a long streak of light.
It's a long streak of light
Zoom out? Oh, is that as far as zoomed out?
That's zoomed out, yeah.
right there.
Huh.
Holy cow.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
That's really strange.
Did you find a way to blow it up? That's
Oh,
kind of
good.
enlarged.
So here's another
of
one.
course, with the
What's
original
the deal with
picture.
this one, Scott?
So this one's going straight up and down, like looks like a pill. Now, when you guys saw, were there different colors, and then the camera takes a different color picture, or is it
Yeah, it's got blue on the two edges and red in the middle.
okay?
Except for the first night.
Okay.
She was sleeping. I should have got her up.
Okay, the first night.
All right.
And I
So
mean,
what
I'm home all
are we
the
looking
time.
at here?
Okay, so we have two other pictures we want to look at. The other ones looked like a single orb. This actually looks separated, and so
There's.
I'll show you. This is actually
You can have all you want.
a backwards.
I mean,
but,
I'll drink the place and I'll go flat.
you can see clearly there's 4 distinct separated entities. If I can find it.
to use it later.
Well, I zoomed
I mean,
in.
it's great at night.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Exactly.
Penny has her own.
And as you zoom in, it almost looks like
bathroom. I
a
just get up on across the
shape,
hall.
and I don't know if that's from the
room.
pixelated, but it looks like a microphone or something.
Actually, I'm
It
not
does,
close
doesn't
to
it?
the
Yeah.
toilet.
That's
mirror.
interesting. Yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about.
But I'm wondering if it's beings.
But-
This one you
Do
could
you recall
kind of make
in
out an
last week,
arm and a
honestly,
head,
seeing
maybe.
stars?
Right.
But
One night.
but it's
See, 'cause I don't recall
it's
seeing
strange
stars.
because on the next one
Yeah, I think I
they get closer.
They were very faint. Yeah, well, Sammy's in love.
Right.
Well, actually
Yeah.
these are backwards, so that I think they were separating,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
From
so
the-
they're coming. Yeah.
and so that's interesting. Next one,
Animals love her. All animals love her.
this one they're getting
Go get her.
more together. You can
More
see
together. Yeah.
a little bit of light there, and it's really
He's a burrito
interesting.
now. He's
That's
then-
interesting. What
Don't
do you
weigh
make of
2.5
that?
pounds. The vet just got
Um,
him a hair under 10.
I'm thinking if it is
I couldn't believe he only weighed 2.5.
I'm thinking it could be
He didn't look like
celestial
it.
beings.
That's about 4 years
Maybe
ago.
when they transport down here, they
Do what?
separate, or they fly together. Perhaps I don't know, but
Yeah, I did
if
all
they are
that stuff
celestial
last
beings,
week,
I don't know what they were doing, just floating around. But
Yeah, we've made a lot of videos.
if it's not celestial beings, it could
Kentucky.
be terrestrial, out of
There's a teen.
alien type
Um,
They're
beings,
sleeping in a prison or something tonight.
Tennessee Wraith Chasers.
and who knows what they're doing. But I'm
Yeah,
kind of
they do,
curious to
Are
go
those just
find
I hate to
out.
say this, are those couple
As,
idiots
you
that
know,
have
guessing
extra-
where specifically
No,
this
that's,
was happening.
Those
Ghost
guys.
Adventures.
But it's hard to tell with the
I
depth
was
of
telling
these
Jeff, I
pictures.
said, I've watched the
So I
program
kind of want
a
to
few
go out there and
times.
Yeah.
look around.
Let's go out there and
But
take
I
a
don't know
look in
what
the
the world
backyard
they're
and see
hearing
what
or
we can
whatever,
find
because
out.
I never hear or see anything they claim they're hearing.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to try something. We have this signal here that was picked up in Ohio in 1977, and it's believed to be of an extraterrestrial nature. So I heard this report where someone had used walkie-talkies similar to this, and they transmitted this signal through the walkie-talkies and actually had some activity. So we're going to play this signal for a few seconds and see if anything happens. Your phone turned off? The battery wasn't low? Oh, that's interesting.
Just died, huh?
Hmm.
Oh my.
It turned itself back on too?
No, I just turned it.
Oh, you turned it back on. Okay. What is that?
I don't know. Push the button again here. Let's make sure it's transmitting. I got this other walkie-talkie here so we can make sure that it is transmitting through here. And it is. It is coming through.
I have 69%.
That's interesting. Check.
Now this is a 72-second recording of this signal that came through.
Why did it stop? Did it stop before in the recording?
I don't know that I ever listened to it that long because it hurt my ears.
Yeah.
But it is a 72-second recording. That's as long as they could get the satellite dish to record when they originally got it.
You can go ahead and cut the video.